Happy Friday. Welcome to the show. It is the Sandy and Shawn program. That's Sandy Clough. I'm Shawn Drotar. Danny Bailey producing as always. Nice to have you with us. Not so nice, Sandy. Maybe the news for the Denver Broncos, at least in the way they're perceived across the nation. ESPN this week put together its football power index, and they expect the Broncos to be one of the worst teams in the league. Now, that's not a shock. We talked about, well, Pro Football Focus considered them earlier in the week, that the dead last roster in the league, 32nd. Quarterback situation, they rank 37. I have a 32nd. I have a quibble with that, but I don't argue with the fact that it's definitely down there. And now ESPN runs its simulation through its football power index and has the Broncos picking third in the draft, which is the way they've started doing it, just to see where the draft would turn out. Well, if you're picking third in the draft, Sandy, you had a bad year, and that's really what they're talking about regarding the Broncos.
In 2010, the Broncos were awful. Josh McDaniels was fired in December of 2010. Eric Studesville succeeded him on an interim basis. And in 2011, John Fox was hired to be the next Bronco coach. John Fox was joining an inexperienced executive, someone by the name of John Elway at that time. And it was Fox who probably had more influence over that first draft than he had at any other point during his quite successful 4-year stint as Bronco coach. The Broncos made the playoffs in each one of those 4 years when John Fox was here. Now, I don't now and didn't then particularly disagree with the decision to move on from John Fox after the 2014 season. The Broncos had lost their first playoff game following the 14 regular season. They had been embarrassed the year before at the Super Bowl. They had been upset in 2012 in the divisional round of the AFC playoffs by the Baltimore Ravens on the famous Flacco fling, losing in overtime to the Ravens, who eventually went on to win the World Championship. They selected Von Miller, number 2 overall in 2011, I believe.
That's correct.
That is correct.
Oh, yeah.
And I would guess, since they went, if memory serves, 4-12 in 2010 and got the number 2 overall pick after winning just 4 games the previous year, that projecting the Broncos to draft third this year would mean maybe as many as 4 wins out of 17. But perhaps fewer than 4.
Maybe so. And that's, of course, the interesting part of what those numbers really mean. And when they're talking about those draft odds, I think you want to look at them in the wider perspective. And when you do, it is kind of an understanding there's a range there, right? When you're looking at the FPI index, you're going to look at the fact that they rate the teams, they simulate the teams 10,000 times and get an idea where the season is. For the Broncos, they have them with a 12.4% chance of landing the top pick in the draft, which obviously means you're awful, like 1 or 2 wins bad. I don't think the Broncos will be that bad, even in a tough AFC West. But they have a 50.9% of chance of picking in the top 5, which sounds like a really bad season too, but a 77.1% chance, Sandy, of picking in the top 10. We know they picked 12 in this year's draft. What those numbers are suggesting are the same thing that you and I have been saying all spring. The Broncos are due for a backslide, and maybe a big one.
Well, I think that correlates, although not in terms of formula, but doesn't it correlate with the Vegas over-under of 5.5 wins in 2024 for the Broncos?
Sure.
They're a 50-50 bet to have a top 5 pick. They're more than 3/4 likely to have a top 10 pick. Going 8-9 last year, another losing season.
Mm-hmm.
Their 7th losing season in succession.
It's the longest
the Broncos
streak a defending champs ever had.
No better than the 12th overall pick for winning 8 games.
Right.
So if you're saying there's better than a 77% chance, almost 77.5% chance that they'll finish with a top 10 pick, they ain't winning 8 games.
No.
And getting the top 10
No,
pick.
8 games got you 12. So, I mean, there you go. And so if they're likely to backslide, that's one of the challenges. Right now, the Broncos, when you're looking at the current playoff droughts, it is 8 seasons for the Broncos. The only longer one that is at least current is the New York Jets, who will get Aaron Rodgers back and hope to get a little bit better with that. The last time they appeared in the playoffs, they got to the AFC Championship back in 2010. That's the last time the Jets made the playoffs. It's been 13 years for them since. But no team has ever had as many losing seasons in a row following a Super Bowl win than the Denver Broncos. This is a new record.
And it isn't even close.
No, it isn't. And that's really, to me, sort of the fascinating part of this, is because the drought is it's immense. And it's the reason that these things have gotten switched around. Ownership's changed up, multiple coaches, quarterbacks galore. All these things are what happens when you have a bad team, right? But at the same time, this is unprecedented. And the Broncos aren't likely to change it. Here's, however, why I'm going to argue that it's not necessarily a bad thing this year. Because I do think that under Sean Payton, I have questions about Sean Payton for sure. But I do understand the idea of letting him bring in his guys, install his offense. You hired him, you paid him $20 million a year to do his thing, right? I mean, that's the point. So let him do his thing. That's going to take a year or two of turnover. This year's turnovers seemingly even more significant at certain positions than last year's turnover. But a lot of it has now become Payton's team, as we've discussed. So now he's got his quarterback. Picks Bo Nix number 12 overall. The quarterback fit with the coach seems to be pretty good. You and I have argued that even if the Broncos had picked in the top 3 this year, or even the top 2, they still might have picked Bo Nix.
Might very well have done that.
So Payton has his guy, and yeah, it's going to take a little while to get things going. But I guess when you look at it, I see what's happening under Sean Payton, even though the Broncos won't admit it. Sean Payton won't admit it. The Broncos are rebuilding. The Broncos know they are rebuilding. The Broncos understand they are rebuilding. And maybe they took a long look at the mirror and realized that they won a couple games last year that were a little bit fortunate on their part to get to 8 wins. They moved away from a quarterback that at least was a borderline Hall of Famer before coming to Denver and gone with the rookie. You should expect a backslide. I think that what we're seeing from the Broncos, not necessarily what we're hearing from the Broncos, but what we're seeing from the Broncos, which is really all that kind of matters, is a maturity as an organization that is more substantial than last year's. That's a good sign.
Oh, I think they're good signs that they'll be better than they were last year, even if their record is not as good.
And
that is always the trickiest of propositions. When you say that a team has improved, you're generally forecasting that their record will be better than it was the previous season. It doesn't always work that way. It depends on the division you're in. It depends on your schedule. It depends on luck, where injuries fall or don't fall for your team, for any given opponent you may be playing. That's why it's so silly when the schedule comes out to go game by game and check off certain weeks as almost certain wins or certain losses, because you just don't know, even with good teams, whether they'll be healthy. The best example from last year was the Jets. Any preseason prognostication relating the Jets to a playoff contending team
got wiped out in a handful of snaps.
Was wiped out after 4 plays,
right,
because Aaron Rodgers got hurt and was out for the rest of the season after 4 plays. Every prediction was premised on the idea that Rodgers would play. Not that everybody thought the Jets would be great, but every prediction, good, bad, average, predicated on Rodgers being the quarterback more or less throughout the season. At least for a majority of the games, the starting quarterback.
Right.
And he was the starting quarterback for just 1 game, and even in that game, only played for 4 plays. Now, they came back and actually won that game against Buffalo, which surprised a fair number of people. They also surprised a fair number of people when they came into Denver and won. And prior to last year,
who was playing quarterback
head coach in Denver?
Refresh my memory.
Zach Wilson was playing quarterback that day, and he beat the Broncos the year before. But the difference was the Broncos had brought in Sean Payton last year, and Sean Payton said he would be, I'll clean this up a little bit, torqued off if the Broncos did not make the playoffs.
Right.
He said that during training camp last year, amid many other statements from Sean Payton that raised some eyebrows, to say the least. So it's silly to project, but FPI is a formulaic exercise.
And it's an exercise taken over the course of an entire season, and it's big data because it's 10,000 simulations.
Yes, and it involves a certain amount of projection.
Sure.
And, of course, they can't account for injuries. No one can. I think the Broncos are better than the third worst team in the NFL.
I do too.
But
doesn't
how much
mean they
better?
Won't finish that way.
How much better? I don't know. All that matters when you're talking about draft position is what your record is. The ultimate in the Bill Parcells long held, you are what your record says you are, and in the context in which he said it, at the end of the season. In other words, let's take last year for Sean Payton, a close friend of Parcells. 8-9. You can talk about how they had a winning streak in the middle of the year and had some untimely injuries, perhaps, lost some games that they certainly should have won. But even Sean Payton said, well, you can go back. If you say there are 3 or 4 games we could have won or should have won, there were also 3 or 4 games we could have or should have lost.
And that's the way it usually works in every season.
8-9 was the way it was probably going to come out, maybe in a different way than it did, but getting to 8-9 was not surprising to you. It was not surprising to me.
No.
Given what we had thought about this team going into the season.
Them to go 7-10, and
as
they were
did
a little bit better.
As did I, and they were one game better.
One game better, but a lot of things went a little wacky in the AFC West. The Chargers were bad, and then Justin Herbert got hurt. They bottomed out at a 5-12 record. The Raiders actually finished in second with an 8-9 record, but of course,
with no quarterback.
The Broncos haven't beaten them.
No quarterback.
In the 2020s. Right. So there you go.
And the Broncos finally beat the Chiefs, which they hadn't done since the 2015
and
season.
It looked like it when the Chiefs played the Broncos because they kind of did it at half speed. They had it on cruise control.
And half the team was sick. That's one of those games. Again, if you looked at it before the season, you'd say based on recent history and the long Chiefs winning streak against the Broncos wouldn't have much of a shot. The Broncos got pounded in Kansas City a few weeks earlier. But that day, Patrick Mahomes showed up sick. Most of the team was feeling the effects. It was one of those viruses that spread throughout the locker room. And it was a cold, kind of almost snowy day.
It equalizes
not bitter cold, but not the kinds of conditions you want.
But it became more of a 50-50 game than you expected.
Right,
Obviously,
exactly right. And the Broncos won easily. And the game meant more to the Broncos than it did to the Chiefs.
Way more. And obviously it might have even maybe convinced Sean Payton to push a little harder in directions that maybe even he regrets. So that part is also interesting, although that will change this year with Bo Nix at quarterback. We'll talk more about the Denver Broncos. Injuries can derail things, and they have already, by the way, started a bit. We'll talk about the Broncos running backs in a moment. But we want to remind you with a big weekend of sports coming up, if you've wanted to jump into online sports betting, it can be confusing. It can be overwhelming. For 4 years now, you've heard all the ads and seen the ads and probably can recite some of them or even have hearing them in your sleep because there's so many of them that it's hard to keep track of them. And it's also hard to keep track of who's offering what and what the best deal might be for you. So we're going to try to help you. We're going to add one more thing, and except make it easy. We'll make it very simple. Mile High Sports has gathered all of the best sign-up bonuses and offers, and we put them all on one page on our website. We wanted to make it easy to navigate this landscape and find the best options for you. So we researched all of them, brought them all together in a way that makes it simple to know what's available, and then you can look at them and decide what's the best option for you in particular. Bonus bets, second chance bets, deposit matches, everything. It's all in one place and easy for you to sort through so you can pick the right choice for yourself so you can jump into the sports betting world in the way you want to do it. Visit milehighsports.com today or download the mobile app, and then you click on Colorado Sports Betting. That's pretty easy, and then you'll get all of it in one spot. So milehighsports.com or the mobile app, Colorado Sports Betting, and you will have all the choices at your fingertips. You don't have to go search anywhere. We've got it all for you. It's that simple. Think of it as your bonus from your friends at Mile High Sports. The Broncos running back room is, and let's actually say, there's a couple ways people say that, Sandy, right? They'll say like stacked, right? Which kind of means you got talent all over the place. Okay. I don't know if the Broncos have stars everywhere, but let's just say it's crowded. And it's crowded.
It's crowded. It's unproven.
It's unproven, but there is promise. Unfortunately, at OTAs, it was revealed that rookie Audric Estime, the Notre Dame 5th-round draft pick, was injured earlier in the process in the processes and had to undergo a scope and a knee surgery. Not considered.
No. It's a procedure, Sean.
Sorry, procedure.
When it's arthroscopic, it's a procedure. It's not surgery.
Okay. It felt like surgery every time I had an arthroscopic procedure, but I guess, tomato. Either way, it's not good when the doctors
it's Sean Payton's way of saying he'll be back for training camp.
Exactly.
It's not a big deal.
Right.
They went into this confused me. Maybe you can clarify.
Mm-hmm.
They went in and found nothing to clean up, so the recovery time is
it turned out not to be very serious, and he wwon't be doing anything in the OTAs of significance, but should be ready for the start of training camp.
There's just the mini camp left now.
Right. So it doesn't sound like
he misses a mini camp.
He misses a mini camp, but the mini camp at least does give you an opportunity to at least get a little more football oriented. They can have more players.
A
little bit more. So Estime will miss all of that. Should be back for training camp. The rookie had 1,483 yards from scrimmage and 18 total touchdowns. When I say total touchdowns, they were all on the ground. He's not much of a pass catcher, but he does have a nose for the end zone. We've talked about him before on this program, and he finds himself in an opportunity here to maybe be the Broncos' long-term solution if everything goes right. However, when you talk about Sean Payton saying he'll be ready, Sean Payton last year talked about Javonte Williams, then recovering from, people say, knee injury. 3 of the 4 ligaments in your knee, the CLs.
It wasn't just the ACL.
No, you have a handful of those. You have 4 of those, as a matter of fact, and 3 of them were damaged. And the recovery seemed to be going faster than normal. About this time of year, Sean Payton said they expected Javonte Williams to be ready for the season. He actually was. Now, he didn't quite look like the guy that we had seen prior to the most recent surgeries, procedures, whatever you want to call it. But
that's surgery.
He was
that's okay, major surgery when it's 3 knee ligaments.
Got it. Yeah, when it's the whole kit and caboodle.
It's not a cleanup.
No, that one's definitely not that. You can do it arthroscopically, and that depends on the tears. But the idea in Williams' case is he led the Broncos in rushing. He tied the Broncos touchdowns on the ground with Russell Wilson with 3. So that's a bar the Broncos hope to clear. But Javonte Williams did make it through the season, and hopefully a year after, he's going to be a little better. At the end of the OTAs yesterday, Broncos coach Sean Payton had an opportunity to talk a little bit about Javonte Williams.
He's been looking good. I think historically speaking, when you talk to the experts, they say, the complete heals finishes at 2 years. Obviously, you begin playing before then. But he's been doing well. He's in shape. I know that he's looking forward to the challenge last year. Really is when you think about it, even in training camp, it was still early enough in the process where it was hard for him to go full speed with confidence, and yet we were building kind of and getting him where he was, where we all felt comfortable that he could play. And so I think he's looking forward to this year and certainly the confidence in his health and the strength of his knee.
I think they rushed him back.
I do too.
I think they rushed him back to make a point that their medical staff, brand new, was far superior than the previous medical staff ever was, and that their year in, year out issue with major injuries was a thing of the past. And the first example was going to be, look at how quickly Javonte Williams has recovered from surgery on not 1, not 2, but 3 knee ligaments from the previous fall. I believe it was October. And as Peyton mentioned, Javonte Williams is a participant, if not a full speed factor, in every practice last year. He might have missed a handful, but they let him go because it was their idea that They wanted him playing after 11 months. And now you hear Peyton say, well, historically speaking, it's 2 years.
Well, he's right about that.
That's right.
He is right.
That's right. But
He
you
didn't
brought
say last
him,
year that he'd
and
be
no, he
100% back.
didn't. But he was the starting running back.
Yeah.
He got most of the work. And maybe for 7 games, half a dozen games, it worked out all right. You look at his numbers and how they dipped in the final 10 games, they rushed him back. He last year should not have played much before November.
It does maybe feel like that on the bright side.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
On the bright
and
side,
I'm not
you
a
did
doctor,
see a spot.
but it's a 2-year injury when it comes to use Peyton's phrase, full healing, a completion of the healing process. That doesn't mean he has to wait 2 years to play. What it does mean is that if you rush him back, 2 years is 24 months. You rush him back and have him playing at 11 months, you can't be surprised when he's a shadow of his former self after 5 or 6 games. He's worn down. And in fact, they played him less. They played P. Ryan more the second half of the year, especially during those 10 games I'm talking about, the final 10 games. Jaleel McLaughlin played a little more. And to show how uncertain they are, again, listen not to what they say, watch what they do. The Broncos drafted the Notre Dame running back, Estime, on the 5th round, and they took an undrafted college free agent in Watson.
Yeah, Blake Watson, who last year 1,600 yards from scrimmage and 17 touchdowns.
Who at the very least last year showed the potential to be a 3rd down back during his rookie year in the NFL.
Yeah, good
Maybe
pass
not
catcher.
A 3 down back, but a 3rd down back who might well succeed P. Ryan and McLaughlin in that role. The significance of this, and I believe them, it doesn't sound like a process or a surgery that was terribly invasive. I'm sure he'll be fine at the start of training camp. It may force the Broncos, whether they want to do this or not, to open the season again with Javonte Williams. And maybe for the first month, Williams has a chance to show whether he's 90%, 95% of the way back, because come October, it will have been 2 years since he underwent surgery.
In the Broncos running back room, and keep in mind, this is a team that has Michael Burton at fullback and is going to retain Michael Burton at fullback. And I'm actually a pro fullback guy. I think there's a lot of reasons to be using them, so I like that. But you're not going to keep 6 backs. So Burton's one of them for sure. And I know you can kind of hide that if you want to massage the roster and say he's kind of a special team or two. I get that. But you're not going to have 5, as we used to call them, halfbacks. The Broncos right now have 5. They have Javonte Williams. They have Samaje Perine, a veteran who's an elite pass blocker and blitz protector.
He's the best of the group as a pass
and
protector.
A very good receiver, finishing.
And possibly as a receiver, too.
Finishing 3rd on the team in receiving. And put it this way, Jerry Jeudy's gone. Cortland Sutton isn't there. Samaje Perine is the team's leading returning receiver as it stands right now. Perine. McLaughlin was impressive as a rookie, obviously, but you're right. Estime and Watson, someone think of a surprise that Watson wasn't drafted, but the running back classes nowadays are very deep. We've seen running backs start to be depreciated, not only in the money they make, but now in the draft. But Watson, to me, has all the earmarks of an NFL player. McLaughlin was a curiosity given his size and where he played, wondering if he could make the NFL, and certainly he did and was effective. But you look at Blake Watson and his career, and you're thinking, well, that guy's going to make the NFL. So if you have 3 players who have been in the NFL already and 2 new guys that absolutely look like they belong in the NFL, you can't keep 5 of them. So if you're the Broncos, at what point do you make a trade, or do you look at someone like McLaughlin and say, unfortunately, given maybe the size and the mileage that he already had on him from his collegiate career, is maybe the situation that McLaughlin or Watson are lobbying for the final spot?
I don't believe Watson's getting cut.
I don't either. I think Watson and Estime are absolutely both making this
And
team.
McLaughlin was also an undrafted college free agent.
Which means no dead cap money of significance either.
I don't think we
move
know anything except what you just outlined, that the Broncos can't keep five.
Can't keep five
running
halfbacks. You can't. And I guess these things will work itself out. Injuries are always part of the equation. You don't want injuries to happen. That certainly would be a factor. But for the Broncos, that's part of this. But you talked about Williams' challenges down to 3.6 yards per carry. It was 4.6 the year before. Of course, he got hurt only a few games in.
Yeah, but look at the last 10
his
games.
rookie year. Yeah, but
it was
the last
like
10 games.
3.2.
Yes. And actually, especially when you look at the last month, when you look at the last
That's
four
even
games
worse.
of the year.
That's like 2.9.
Right. 3 out of the 4 games didn't even get to 3. 2.3 yards per carry against Detroit, 2.2 against New England, 2.7 against the Chargers, and then only 9 carries in the finale against the Raiders, and back to averaging 3.6 and got a touchdown. But again,
so 2.9 is about right.
Only 9 carries. Yeah, actually, it'd be a little lower than that. It'd be about that 2.7, but sub 3 in the last month. And he looks like he wore down. Now, interesting, you go back to his rookie year. In that last month, he wore down too. Dropped off quite a bit in game per game when you're talking about the last handful of games of the season. So some of that may be adjusting to the NFL when you're a youngster. Some of that is, this is a big guy with a bruising style. Maybe by nature, his seasons are going to involve getting worn down if he's not used judiciously. The Broncos may not be able to use him as a bell cow back.
He is a punishing runner, but he takes punishment too.
Right.
And I'm not sure when a running back is stylistically prone to seeking out contact.
I mean, it's
getting
cool
hit
when
a
you're
lot.
Earl Campbell, but virtually everybody else, it hasn't worked out.
I don't know that it worked out for Earl Campbell.
Exactly.
Long term, it didn't work out for Earl Campbell either. All that punishment he took. And he had a relatively brief career as a premier running back, which he, at his peak, most definitely was,
right.
Okay, and was running over people and so on, but took a lot of punishment too. And I suppose that will always be a question about Javonte Williams. And I'm not saying Estime is elusive, but he's harder to hit. He has more of a bowling ball build. He's harder to hit squarely than Williams is. And Williams welcomes the contact and breaks a lot of tackles. When he's right, his yards after contact numbers are sensational. But Estime's yards after contact last year as a collegiate back, I believe, were the best in the country at something like 4.3.
Keep in mind, too, when you talk about those other really bruising backs that went out and sought out punishment, Marshawn Lynch, of course, you think of him as also that kind of guy, beast mode. But remember, following that 2014 season, in which he played 4 more years, never played a full schedule again, only got over 7 games once. Yards per carry went down. He had 13 touchdowns in that 2014 season. He played 4 more years and only had 14 more touchdowns. Right. Even a guy like Marshawn Lynch wears down after he takes those punishments. He hangs around in the league, but he's not the same guy. The exception to the rule, and there's always one, is it's probably Derrick Henry, who averaged 4.2 last year.
It seems to be Derrick Henry.
But
yes,
quite frankly, even as good as Javonte Williams at his best looked, he's never looked like Derrick Henry. Henry just may be one of one. And you don't tend to look at the exception when you look at a player like that and say, well, I'm sure that Javonte Williams is just like Derrick Henry. That's a terrible bet. There's only been one Derrick Henry. There's only been one at least since, let's say, Earl Campbell. So don't count on it happening
Derrick
again.
Henry ever undergo surgery on 3 knee ligaments?
Not that I'm aware of.
I don't believe he did.
No, and that's a part of the equation too. It will work itself out for the Broncos, obviously, as the offseason goes along. Hopefully it does it with on-the-field performance and preseason performances and not with further injury. The Denver Nuggets offseason is already on them earlier than they wanted, as expected, for the defending champs. Now the question about fatigue comes into play. The fatigue from last year. What about the fatigue from next year? Because some of the Nuggets, including maybe the one that fatigue is the biggest concern for, is playing in the Olympics. But first, we'll talk about our friends from Zaner Hardin Law.
No one ever plans to be part of an accident, of any kind, especially a car accident. You just can't plan for it. But when it happens, and especially if in association with that car accident, you sustain a major injury, you need the best lawyers around. You need Zahner Hardin Law. Kurt Zahner and Mark Hardin, the types of lawyers you want handling your case every time. They're two of the most elite personal injury lawyers in Colorado and throughout the country. They've won nearly every award imaginable. Super lawyers, top 100 national trial lawyers, trial lawyer of the year, $1 million advocates. They've appeared in the Denver Post, on many news outlets around town, and of course on Good Morning America as well. These guys handle the most important cases. They work tirelessly to make the community a safer place. They've obtained multi-million-dollar verdicts and yet have the respect of every insurance company. That's an unusual combination of things to have working in your favor. You're lucky to have these guys around the Denver metropolitan area. So if you've been involved in an auto accident, reach out to Zahner Hardin today at yourstorywillbetold.com. That's yourstorywillbetold.com.
The Denver Nuggets are in an offseason in which they looked tired by the end of the year. Now, obviously, there are a couple reasons for that, and some of that is the Nuggets' lack of depth, which we'll also get into. But when you think about this offseason, you think, well, the Nuggets will get rest at least. Their top players will get rest, and that'll make a big difference. Well, maybe not so much. Jamal Murray is expecting to play for Team Canada. Canada, for the first time, made the Olympics in 24 years. So obviously it doesn't happen that often. And Murray intends to be part of it. When asked at the end of the season if he was playing for Canada, he nodded his head and then was asked about the calf and the soreness. He said, I've got rest now. So, and then finished that with the interview with the Denver Post. The challenge of that is that the Olympic schedule is not as taxing, I guess, as you think it might be for the number of games, but you're playing the best of the best in the world now that it's the pros. And Jamal Murray, as maybe, depending on whether Shai Gilgeous-Alexander chooses to play for Canada. If he does, I think,
what a backcourt.
I think that's their best player. But if not, it's probably Jamal Murray. And you can expect that Murray would be leaned on and Murray would feel the pressure naturally playing for his country. I would never, ever, ever, Sandy, suggest that if you had the opportunity to play for your country in the Olympics that you turn it down. I would never suggest that. There's no way. I would absolutely do it if I had the chance. I would do it if I'm Jamal Murray. I'm not criticizing the decision. But I do wonder what it means for the Denver Nuggets. Nikola Jokic, of course, who kind of is the Serbian team, is undecided on whether he's going to play, valuing his own rest, which is interesting. A few years ago, that was not Jokic's perspective. He was going to play. He was very proud to represent his country, as he would be. But Jokic's priorities over time have shifted a little bit more towards his professional career. Murray, in this case, with Canada not usually making it, I get the pressure. But how much, what's your fear factor here for the Denver Nuggets with Jamal Murray, who's played most of the season on a bulky calf, having to go into an Olympic tournament against the best of the best?
My fear is that Jamal Murray has missed 150 games since tearing his ACL in the early spring of 2021, right? And he missed the 21 playoffs, right. Missed the 22 playoffs entirely, although President Tim Connolly, that means that Tim Connolly is now the president of the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Yeah.
That time with the Nuggets, said going into the playoffs it was Murray's choice completely, that he'd been cleared by the doctors. It was up to him. And so when he didn't play, there was a lot of backlash against him from fans who had been told on the air here in Denver that he could play, implying that if he really wanted to play, he could play. The doctors had cleared him. 150 games missed since having that knee surgery. And we all know what happened to Klay Thompson's career.
Klay Thompson specifically said that he talked to Jamal Murray after his injury,
right,
telling him
after the game, because
it pressured to come back.
Happened in San Francisco, and that's exactly what Klay Thompson advised Jamal Murray to do. And that advice was echoed the following year before the playoffs began by Nikola Jokic and Aaron Gordon, who both said he should not come back a second before he is ready to come back. Klay Thompson told him the same thing. Don't let them pressure you into coming back early. And Klay Thompson had been through a similar injury as well as a torn Achilles. And to this day, it's affected his career.
Sure.
There are stretches in which Klay Thompson is as good as he ever was, but night in and night out, Klay Thompson can't play the way he once did. I'm not saying that's around the corner for Jamal Murray, but there will come that time, and any additional wear and tear on top of the 150 games he has missed with various injuries, even apart from the ACL tear. Look at the injuries he had this year, all kinds of injuries, leg-related injuries, but ankle, calf, knee soreness. You can go up and down the list of possible leg injuries a basketball player customarily sustains maybe over the course of a career. He had most of those injuries, if not all of them, this year. And that would be my concern with the Nuggets, while also understanding there's nothing they can do to prevent him from playing.
No.
And there is a significant rest period for him between what was an early exit from the playoffs and the start of the Olympics. And the Olympic games are not as taxing
and it's
on a player as NBA
late
playoff
July
games are.
as well,
right,
by the way.
Right.
Late July is when it starts.
When did their season end? Mid-May, right? So you're talking about
2.5 months.
2.5 months. That's
before
10
you're playing
weeks.
games. You'll
That's
obviously
10
be practicing.
weeks.
But yeah.
I would think his calf would be fine by then. I know during the All-Star break, Christian Brown of the Nuggets talked for the first time about all of the little injuries he had been playing through during the first half of the season, and the All-Star break, which is 1 week, he said would refresh him. And he was a much better player after the All-Star break than he had been in the weeks and months leading up to the All-Star break. So I have no doubt that 10 weeks of rest will do Jamal Murray a world of good. I've always said the issue with Jamal Murray is that he has to be sometimes protected from himself. And I think the Nuggets did that this year, but that's something. It's tempting to play him, especially when you need games late in the regular season, and certainly during the playoffs, you can't afford to sit him out, even though he was clearly playing not only hurt, but injured in the playoffs. My concern would be that relying on Jamal Murray, who always wants to play, they have no control at the Olympics over whether he plays or not, or how much he plays.
It'll be a lot.
Wear and tear.
Let me give you what
it creates a lot of uncertainty, I think.
This is what Canada's Olympic team would look like as it stands today. And of course, players still have to opt in here and there, but this is the expectation, at least from Team Canada. Nikhil Alexander-Walker of the Timberwolves, RJ Barrett of the Raptors, Dylan Brooks of the Rockets, Lou Dort and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Thunder,
team.
Jamal Murray, of course, Andrew Nembhard of the Pacers, now available.
Who was great, especially after Halliburton got hurt in the last series against Boston, even though they lost.
Kelly Olynyk of the Raptors, Dwight Powell of the Mavs, although maybe he might need a little more rest, more on them in a minute, and Andrew Wiggins of the Warriors. That's a formidable team. In Jokic's case, with Serbia, he is still on the fence. Obviously, they want him back. Serbia finished second in the FIBA World Cup last year to Germany. They didn't have Jokic. This is also a team that won a medal in 2016. Guess who Serbia plays first on July 28th?
Canada.
The United States.
The United States, all right.
So you might end up with a significant challenge if Jokic decides to opt in. My guess is that he probably will. They are so close to being an elite team and a statement that he can make. And plus, we know how much he loves his native land of Serbia. So I think that he probably will. But I'm so much less concerned about Jokic managing his minutes and his rest than I am Murray.
I will say this. He loves Serbia, but he also loves his horses.
They're in Serbia. Unless he has some here, which he does. But anyway, we'll find out a little bit.
I understand that. Yeah. But he loves his horses.
And he does feel he's already done his bit.
To make.
Yeah. So we'll find out. But obviously for the Nuggets, those two players, the most significant players on the Nuggets are the guys that may end up in the Olympics, and we'll see if it affects anything whatsoever. I want to take a moment to talk about, again, very sad news in the Denver Nuggets. It's been a rough, really rough off-court year for the Nuggets. We know about the situations with Michael Porter Jr.'s siblings, but unfortunately yesterday, Drew Gordon, Aaron Gordon's older brother, former NBA player as well, passed away after a car crash Thursday afternoon in Oregon at the age of only 33.
And he's very close to his brother.
And
if you've read the stories on Aaron Gordon and heard him talk down through the years, he and his brother were exceedingly close.
Yeah. The preliminary investigation from the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office indicated that Gordon crossed over the center line and collided with a pickup truck. The people that were collided with in the pickup truck were taken to hospital, but non-life-threatening injuries. Gordon unfortunately died at the scene, but they said that impairment did not appear to be a factor, though they are investigating it. The Nuggets said in a statement, the Denver Nuggets organization is devastated to learn about the tragic passing of Drew Gordon. Drew was far too young to leave this world, but his legacy will forever live on through his 3 beautiful children and all of his loved ones. Our hearts are with Aaron and the Gordon family during this extremely difficult time. And obviously, these are the kind of things that it happens. You have to deal with, and it just seems, however, like the Nuggets have had more than their share of challenges for its players off court in the last year. Hopefully next year things get a little bit better for the Nuggets. So condolences to Aaron Gordon and his family, Drew Gordon's family. Just awful news about his passing at only 33 years old yesterday up in Oregon. The Nuggets have an offseason in front of them in which they have to do a couple things, Sandy. They don't really have a choice. The depth has not matured necessarily, but they don't have a lot of money in which to do it. And if they end up with KCP and Reggie Jackson both accepting their player options, that's $10 million more at minimum. Or really, it's 20, 15 for KCP and 5 for Reggie Jackson. They will probably exercise, assuming the medicals come out promising like they expect, the $2.3 million club option on Vlatko Čančar, who obviously could have helped maybe relieve their big man challenges a little bit. But then again, they don't have an actual big man. And you look at the teams that continued on, the last few teams in the tournaments here, when you talk about the Pacers, when you talk about the Timberwolves, when you talk about the Mavs, when you talk about the Celtics, they have big men and shot blockers. They're altering the way teams run their offense, and that's part of the equation too.
That's why I've said, now that Dallas has beaten Minnesota in 5 games, I'm not so sure that the Nuggets would have done a lot better than Minnesota did after the grueling series that obviously took a lot out of Minnesota. It would have taken, even if Denver had won, it would have taken a lot out of Denver. Dallas was fresher. I did a double take when I saw these numbers once the game was done last night. The Dallas Mavericks are 12-5 in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not extraordinary. The Nuggets were 16-4 last year.
Right.
The
Celtics are 12-2.
In their last 35 games, regular season plus playoffs, the Dallas Mavericks have won 28 and lost 7. The last 2 champions going into the NBA Finals, the Nuggets last year and the Warriors the year before, were both 22 and 13. Dallas is the hottest team going into the finals of any of the Western Conference teams. The Nuggets last year and the Warriors, both of whom won, beating Eastern opposition. The Nuggets beating Miami, Warriors beating Boston a couple of years ago. The Mavericks are playing at a higher level right now in relation to the competition than either the Nuggets last year or the Warriors the year before were. 28-7 to me speaks for itself. And with the exception, I charted the losses with the exception of maybe 2 games. Out of those 7 they lost, they were right in the other 5 and could have won those games too.
Well, we do have an NBA Finals now, Boston and Dallas. We'll take a look at that. And you talk about the way Dallas finished hot. They finished hotter, and even more than that, Sandy. I'll give you a stat on the other side. But I want to remind you that, the Colorado home market has been crazy for years, and it's hard to navigate. You need people with experience. You need people who have been stable, that know how the market works and can ride those highs and lows. And that's why you need to talk to Dave and Mark at Key Real Estate Group's Colorado Luxury Home Team if you are looking to sell your home. Obviously, selling a home in Colorado is a pretty good deal. But unless you're one of those people that have multiples, it's the most important thing you own, the most valuable thing you own, and you want to make sure that you maximize it. So when we call them Colorado's Luxury Home Team, doesn't mean it's the luxury home. That's all well and good. It's whatever you're selling. It's the luxury service that you will get. You get Dave and Mark. That's why I'm referring to them by name. 25 years in the same offices, privately held company. You get them, and they've been there, seen it, done it everything you're looking for in the marketplace. The experience is there and their ability is there, and they will treat you the way that you deserve to be treated. The Fed is still expected to lower rates this year in 2024. So beat the competition, and you can move with your home before the frenzy returns to Denver. And obviously, this is the kind of situation where you want to make sure that you're getting things absolutely right. So call Dave and Mark and let them give you a free valuation. Inventory around Denver is very, very low, and prices that are set right on their homes, they sell like that. When the weather's warming up, the people are out there looking for homes. If you're looking to sell yours, you can't do any better, and there's no reason to wait when you're talking about calling Dave and Mark. So let them represent you so you get everything you deserve out of your home. Call Dave and Mark at the Key Real Estate Group at 720-900-LIST. That's 720-900-LIST, or visit them today at thekeyrealestategroup.com. NBA finals are set. They won't start until the 6th. You pointed that out earlier this week. If these were short series and one went 4 and one went 5, it's going to be a ways. So you still have a week here.
What's that, Thursday?
Yep, exactly. And so the situation now is looking at these two teams, but we know about Boston, right? We mentioned 12-2 in the postseason, 64-18 record, NBA's best. I am not knocking Boston, but they also, multiple things can be true at the same time, might have had one of the easiest paths to the finals that I've seen a team have in my entire career covering the NBA, which is more than 25 years at this point. The Eastern Conference was flattened out. The talent among the top was really only about 3 teams. Yes, there were some teams with promise. Orlando was promising. Indiana was promising, and I think certainly overperformed. The Knicks, if they had not been injury prone, might have been able to be one of those teams. But it really, even at the start of the season, looked like it was Boston, Philly, and Milwaukee in any order you want.
And then
the other
Milwaukee
two teams
had injuries, and Philadelphia really had injuries.
Right. And so Boston was able to put it on basically cruise control and get to the NBA Finals, where they will await the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks coming out of it is a bit of a surprise, but you explained the way they finished. But how about this? We talked about Minnesota and how well they played. I had said that the winner of the Denver Minnesota team, the series, would win the NBA championship. Obviously wrong on that front because they're both out. But I really liked Minnesota's defense and thought that would be able to carry the day, even against that talented backcourt of Luka and Kyrie. But you know what I didn't take into account? Dallas's defense.
Exactly.
In the final,
which was better than Minnesota's defense.
In the final 15 games of the regular season, the Dallas Mavericks had the NBA's best defense. And you want to know why they got hot? It's not only because they can score, but it's because after adding some of the guys they did, including Daniel Gafford at center, the Mavs now also defend.
Well, last night as I was watching, it was clear early on that they had no answer for Doncic. And by the end of the game, Kyrie had 36 and Doncic had 36, and they collectively shot over 50%. And yet the difference in the game was because Edwards and Towns both had 28. Not bad.
No.
Minnesota. Difference in
all.
the game was the supporting cast contributed. Washington, 12 points in 36 minutes. Gafford, 11 points in 20 minutes.
9 boards in
off
those 20
the
minutes.
bench. Lively, 9 points in 25 minutes, though he got hit in the head again. Kept playing. Hardy, 7 points in 8 minutes. You get the idea. They have depth. They have a bench. And they have guys who can defend. And the 2 guys they brought in at the trade deadline, P.J. Washington and Gafford, are exceptionally good defensive players. And Gafford only played 20 minutes last night.
Yeah, 11 points and
Lively,
9 boards in 20
banged
minutes.
up as he was, played more minutes, although it really didn't matter. The game was over competitively at the end of the first
But look at
quarter.
that front court size. Gafford, Washington, Lively, and even Powell can come off the bench. They have, we just talked about, Powell is on the Canadian Olympic team.
Right.
They have size. And it really complicated things for Minnesota. It's one of the reasons where I look at what the Nuggets need to do in the offseason. It is athletic size.
It's athletic size.
But the Nuggets don't even have size, athletic or otherwise, when you're talking about getting past their starting 5. That's the issue. And so these are the kind of things where the NBA can evolve rapidly, because even like the NFL, which is cyclical in the way teams get designed, right? It's 53-man rosters. It takes a little while to turn it over. Those rosters are not that big in the NBA. You can turn it over a little bit faster. And as the league adjusted to what the Denver Nuggets were doing, in the Nuggets moving away from size and decentralizing their offense and not worrying about the three-point shot and pace and space that everybody else was doing. You've hounded them about the pace for a while. The whole league was pace and space. The Nuggets didn't do that all that much.
The Nuggets are annually
they didn't worry about
28th, 29th in pace.
Right. How about
30 teams?
How about this? Now, this part is interesting. I guess not surprising when you talk about Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns and Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Isolation possessions this season. So the old Carmelo Anthony ISO ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
One guy dribbles, everyone else gets out of the way. The Mavericks were second in isolation possessions this year. Not really a shock. The Celtics were third. Not surprisingly, if you were to say who's first, it was the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, all ISO guys. But that's a little bit of a back to the future idea for them too. Go with a little bit of ISO ball, and granted, there's stars that do it. You have Tatum and obviously
Jaylen Brown,
who
is the Eastern Conference playoff MVP, right?
Right.
Or the Eastern
and
Conference
Luka
Finals
and Kyrie. So there's reasons to be more affixed to ISO ball than there are, say, for the Denver Nuggets, who don't really have ISO players.
No.
But that part is not really what the Nuggets are worrying about. But here's the thing you probably should. 3-point attempts this season. Celtics, number 1, 42.5 per game. Mavericks, number 2, 39.5 per game. Denver Nuggets, 30 out of 30.
Right. They're last. And
so you
don't have to be first, but you don't want to
be
be last either in 3-point attempts. You want to be closer to the middle of the
slowly
league.
Paced. The problem is what the Nuggets have done to win last year. And look, they finished tied for the second best record in the NBA and lost it on the tiebreaker to Oklahoma City. They finished tied for the second best record.
Right.
I'm not saying it's a disaster by any stretch, but you win these championships on the margins. And the Nuggets no longer have a margin, and the other teams that have adjusted, including Minnesota, who knocked them out, they do. And it's the fact they have better three-point shooting. They have more three-point shooting. They have more big man depth. Both of of these things and the lack of them are part of what wiped out the Denver Nuggets season. Maybe even if they had one of the two, better three-point shooting off the bench or better three-point shooting as a team, or more athletic bigs to spell Nikola Jokic. Maybe either one of them. And the Nuggets might still be playing against the Mavericks right now in a Western Conference Finals. But the league evolves quickly, and it means the Nuggets are going to have to evolve quickly too, and they don't have a lot of money to do it.
I just think you're right that you don't throw away the season. I mean, it was a record-time NBA season when it came to wins. The Nuggets won 57 games in 2013. In 2024, they also won 57 games. Two best regular season records they've ever had as an NBA franchise. So you don't flush everything. But at the same time, you take note of the fact that if Phoenix had lost to Minnesota on the final day of the regular season, and probably the game didn't matter because Minnesota knew it would play Phoenix, wanted to play Phoenix, would have home court advantage against Phoenix. But if Minnesota had won that game, the Nuggets would have finished third. Mm-hmm. And that's third in the West. That's not third in the league. So you're right. As a matter of fact, their record was tied for second best. But they could have easily had Minnesota beaten Phoenix. They would have finished in third place in the West. And you look at what's behind them, you see fifth place Dallas with a 28-7 record in its last 35 games, finishing the regular season 16-2, 8-2 in its last 10 playoff games. Dallas is on the rise, and Dallas is not old. And a year ago at this time, you were wondering whether they could keep Doncic long term. You don't hear that question asked anymore. No. There's no question that he is right now, individually, he is the face of the NBA.
Yes.
Not Anthony Edwards, not Jason Tatum. It's unquestionably Luka Doncic.
Finished third in the MVP voting behind Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And I think you're right. I think not only, and the funny thing is, not only because of his team's success and his personal success, but the way he plays, he has many of Jokic's skills and vision, but a lot more flash to his game. And you're right. I think Luka Doncic is the kind of player the NBA is traditionally more than happy to hitch their wagon to and say, yeah, this is our.
They'd rather
guy.
it be Edwards and not a European. And even Embiid, I think they'd prefer to Jokic. But the fact of the matter is,
Edwards,
Jokic has been the best player. And right now, remaining in the playoffs, I think Boston will beat Dallas.
I do too.
But I think the best player left in the playoffs is Luka Doncic.
I think
not
that's hard
Jason
to argue.
Tatum.
Hard to argue
that. I noticed that the odds on Finals MVP favor Tatum at minus 130. These are FanDuel odds. Doncic is plus 200. Then you drop all the way down to Jaylen Brown at plus 600, and Kyrie at plus 2,400. So I think Tatum at minus 130. I don't know about that one. I think Doncic should be maybe plus 150, maybe plus 125. Again, the MVP in the finals comes from the winning team almost every time.
Right.
Jerry West once was a finals MVP
when the
Lakers lost to the Celtics. But that's not going to happen very often. I think Tatum might well be the MVP because I think Boston won the series. But I have no doubt that Luka Doncic, especially with some rest now, to get over all these injuries that made him officially list as questionable
right.
for every game, right? There's never any doubt that he was going to play, but he was always listed as questionable. He'll have this week to rest up until Thursday night, June 6th in Boston. I think he'll be that much better for having the rest. And he decided the game in the first quarter last night. Luka Doncic 20, the Minnesota Timberwolves 19. The game was over at the end of the first quarter.
Keep in mind, too, one of the fun stories about this is going to be Kyrie Irving, too. Played for Boston, was an all-star both years he was with the Celtics, having an opportunity
that will be interesting
to come back as well.
And he
Irving
played great
he's
in this series.
So good.
And it was his shot that beat the Nuggets late in the regular season on the way to going 16-2.
It took a while for them to get on the same page, but they are, and that's what we've talked about it a little bit, but again, wherever he stands in the pantheon of coaches, which quite frankly, I don't think is all that high, Jason Kidd this year has been as good or better when you're talking about the job, the actual fingers in the pie job of coaching than anybody in the NBA.
We have to remember Dallas was 34-28.
Yep.
And
everyone's wondering if it's going to work to blow it up. They lose Doncic.
People were saying they'll be in the play-in tournament. Possibly. They end up going 16-2, rising up to 5th place, surpassing Phoenix, which nobody had them doing, finishing with a record of 52-30. And if you look right now at regular season wins plus playoff wins, you have the Dallas Mavericks at 64 and the Denver Nuggets at 64.
You want kind of a scary number as well. When you get into the cap space next year, the Dallas Mavericks have the 12th most. Oklahoma City has the 5th most, and they were already number 1. The Nuggets were the hunted. Now they're the hunters once again, and it may be a significant chase in this offseason and next season as well. Big time attention being drawn up to Fort Collins this fall, as much as I can remember in a very, very long time, as the Rocky Mountain Showdown game that was on ESPN late, like 2 a.m. late on the East Coast last year, triggered enough of an avalanche of interest that now Campus Stadium in Fort Collins will be one of the heavily featured locales in primetime. We'll talk more about the showdown in a moment, but it is Friday. Works well on Friday. Little, fish and chips.
Absolutely, and perfect kind of weather. A little cooler today, which is perfectly fine. You've heard their signature ads for years, and by now you probably know that locally owned and operated GB Fish and Chips has the best drinks, meat pies, and fish and chips in the country. Not just here locally, not regionally, throughout the country. GB Fish and Chips caters as well, and they're terrific at that. With graduation and summer block parties either here or right around the corner, Give your friends and family a unique Fry on-site experience. The best part of catering is nobody has to do any work except the good folks from GB Fish and Chips. Stop by any of their 4 metro locations or visit gbfishandchips.com and bring authentic fish and chips to your next gathering. That's gbfishandchips.com.
The Rocky Mountain Showdown will be on CBS in primetime Saturday, September 14th in Fort Collins, the rematch from last year. Obviously, Deion Sanders still attracts a great deal of attention as the Colorado Buffaloes, but the really scrappy Rams, and I remember talking about this on the show we had last year before this game, that if the Rams could give the Buffs a fight on national TV, it would change the trajectory of their program. They gave them everything the Buffs wanted and maybe a little more. They had an 11-point lead with about 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and the Buffaloes come back. They get it into overtime. They win it in double overtime. But at that point, CSU made a statement, and enough that CBS decided we're putting this thing on primetime. Pun slightly intended.
Well, there'll be a packed house at Canvas Stadium up in Fort Collins, and we haven't seen a lot of packed houses through the years.
I can't imagine that one will be.
They will be coming out.
This isn't the CBS Sports Network that usually shows Rams game. This is the big dog.
No, this is CBS showing this game. And I think it's the most intriguing game on the schedule for both teams. CU has an interesting opener. But
North Dakota State.
Yes. But for CSU, I think it is a program-defining game. And I think there is maybe quite a bit more pressure on CSU to win the game this year, playing at home, given the fact that even some of the most notable and well-respected Colorado observers were saying after last year, hey, CU won the game, but CSU outplayed them.
Oh, that was the moment, right? They got to 3-0 with that win, but that was the moment you realized with the Buffs, you're like,
it's probably not going to
go well
a little
the
following week against Bo Nix and Oregon. That's when you understood,
and it did not,
that they would struggle to win 6 games. Well, they didn't get anywhere near 6 wins. They finished 1-8 and ended up 4-8 for the season. Colorado State, had they managed to hold on to that 11-point lead in the final 8 minutes of regulation on that Saturday night in Boulder early in the season, they would have been bowl eligible by the end of the year.
They would have. They finished,
and they almost got there anyway. Hawaii beat them out of a ball game at Hawaii.
They lost to UNLV by only 2 points.
Correct.
They lost the border war at Wyoming in single digits. They were close. This is a program that is on the rise under Jay Norvell. They have a new AD. We just talked about that yesterday. And John Weber and a new assistant AD and Steve Sidwell coming over from Penn State. It's a great opportunity for the Rams, who will need the win, put it that way. We said earlier in the program, you don't want to go through schedules and say this is a win, this is a loss, this is a win, this is a loss. For the most part, they start on August 31st. The Rams do at Texas. Yikes. That's an ESPN game. So national TV there too, but they're out there to be the Washington Generals to the Texas Globetrotters.
In Texas first year, right? Southeast Conference.
Oh my. And then the next week they will host Northern Colorado, where you would presume the Rams would get the better of that. And then their third game will be against the Buffs. So they will likely be either 1-2 or 2-1, depending on how that game rolls along. For the Buffaloes, it feels like a must-win game for them. They will start with North Dakota State. And that'll be an ESPN game. And that's a tougher game
North
than
Dakota State
think.
will not be a push.
No, they will be in Boulder, but then they will travel to Nebraska. They beat Nebraska last year.
That'll be a tough
one. That'll be an NBC game.
Yeah.
That was the second game last year. And then Colorado State, the third game again at CBS. So a good look for the programs in the first 3 weeks. Colorado State has an ESPN appearance and a CBS appearance. The Buffs have a CBS, an NBC, and an ESPN. So trying to find a way to take advantage of these situations for these programs and kind of cash it in. In the Buffs case, it feels like they have to walk out of those first 3 games at minimum 2-1, preferably 3-0. If they end up beating Nebraska, if they start out 2-0, you need to be 3-0. If they start out 1-1, you need to be 2-1. So that's an important game. And it feels like one way or another for the Rams, if they're going to make a bowl, they need to be 2-1 after that game as well. So something's got to give. There's actual stakes for both of these programs who are one game short of bowl eligibility. It's exciting to actually see this start to matter again. And remember the kind of shootout you got last year, because remember, both quarterbacks return. Shedeur Sanders had 348 yards, 4 touchdowns and a pick. Braden Fowler-Nicolosi, who has really established himself as the starter, 367 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks. That ended up being the difference in the game. But that's when you realize that Fowler-Nicolosi could play too. He's back for another year in that air raid offense for Novell. He should be better. The presumption is Shedeur Sanders should be better, right? He's projected to be maybe a top 5 pick in the draft. You'd expect him to be better. I would expect this one to be high scoring again, but also really entertaining, which is exactly why CBS picked it up.
I think we saw the CSU quarterback come of age last year in that particular game.
Yes, we did.
Without
I think
question.
So.
And I think already once the game was done, people were looking ahead to the game up in 2024.
And students were.
With established quarterbacks on both sides rather than first-time starters on one side and a fairly established quarterback in Shedeur Sanders between his experience at Jackson State and the first 2 games at Colorado, which, especially the first one, were sensational outings for him.
Yeah, many of the names turned around, though, already. Of course, Dylan Edwards transferred out for Colorado. Xavier Weaver's moved on. Michael Harrison, who caught the winning touchdown, moved on, transferred away. So a lot of transfers out of Colorado. So a lot of the players in that game that were there are not there anymore, obviously. But when you look at the scoring plays, the first game, the touchdown of the game, in case you forgot, was actually an 80-yard pick 6 by Shiloh Sanders. Dallin Holker now moved on. Of course, his eligibility over, gets a touchdown there. Xavier Weaver for the Buffs then scored a touchdown. He's gone. There's not a lot of...
And Travis Hunter got hurt in that game, as we all remember.
Right. Hunter, of course, is expected to be back and is expected again to be a two-way player. But it really feels like this is going to be one of those games in which the veteran quarterbacks are going to be the ones that carry the day, and whether any of the defenses, either one, can actually stop them. That part, we don't know. Yeah,
neither team is known as a defensive stalwart.
Neither coach is known as a defensive expert. For the Buffs, their new defensive coordinator, Robert Livingston, comes from Cincinnati. Their defensive backs coach.
Never been a coordinator.
Although, to be fair, does seem like a guy that is on the career path, that this is the next step and this is probably the time for it.
Okay.
Well, well regarded, but
it's unusual. And I'm not saying he isn't well regarded. It's unusual for a fellow to be in one place for 8 years as a position coach and then get a shot for the first time at being a coordinator. I mean, it's not like he's 32 or 33 years old.
Yeah. That's true. And
then you've got just the opposite issue on the other side of the ball with Pat Shurmur,
right?
Who, yes, does have NFL coaching experience as a head coach and as a coordinator and as a position coach at times along the way. But his career, except for the Minnesota Vikings 2017 Miracle in Minnesota season, has not distinguished himself.
No, and that part is really intriguing because when you're talking about the Buffs, Deion Sanders is really not a game day coach. He does, he works with the officials. He coordinates with the guys here and there. He definitely looks at timeouts and replays and all that sort of stuff, and certainly has confab with his coaches and halftime adjustments. But Shurmur will call the offensive plays. Livingston will call the defensive plays. Sanders and the special teams coordinator is going to call those. Sanders isn't calling plays anywhere. It's kind of a CEO role. That is going to be really interesting because he's turned over his employees a lot. And something that
some of them
that has not
come with him from Jackson State,
right,
and still left after 1 year at Colorado. A lot of relationships soured last year.
In Norvell's case, mostly holdovers. So the idea where you're going to kind of build this a little bit more year after year, and that obviously, it's a different situation. The Rams and the Buffs, even though they both finished with 5 wins, that game was very close. They're sort of in different situations. The conferences are vastly different. The Mountain West Conference may, by the way, and we'll figure out how this all sorts itself out, may eventually sort of become a Power 5 conference if it merges with the two remaining teams of the Pac-12, Oregon State and Washington State. That has been a consideration. Oregon State and Washington State signed an agreement that they would play their football schedules with the Mountain West, at least in the short term. And it might make sense, given the way that the conferences are structured, just for the two Pac-12 schools to just eat the Mountain West, call it the new Pac-12. But until that happens and that Power 5 money comes back, there's really Power 4. And the Buffs are in one and the Rams are not. And that changes the way financial implications are massive in television contracts. The NIL money, because of television contracts and the visibility, is very different. So kind of operating in different areas, but it is interesting to see when we talked about it yesterday. And if you missed any part of the program, you can always go to MileHighSports.com or look at it on the free Mile High Sports app. We talked about the addition of John Weber and Steve Sidwell to the athletic department as AD and associate AD, respectively, yesterday. But it's worth noting that those guys are entirely plugged into the NIL and fundraising scene. So CSU knows what they're getting ready for.
And of course, when Rick George hired Deion Sanders, he didn't have to worry too much about
not getting
NIL
attention
money
or NIL or attracting the attention of the Big 12, as it turns out, a conference that the Buffaloes wanted to get back into.
That was the major reason for bringing Deion Sanders in, because Colorado was never going into the Big 12 without Deion Sanders as head coach.
It feels to me as if CU would have been left over. I don't know who else they would. I don't think
they'd have been left over and left out.
Yeah, I don't think that Oregon State or Washington State would have been picked up, but I think there would have been 3 left out. And I think Colorado would have been one of them, even though the basketball program's been good. There are tons of great programs at Colorado. When you're talking about the Big 12, best basketball conference in the country, but football still drives it. And I think you're right that investment in Deion Sanders, no matter how the win-loss record turns out, it got the Buffs where they needed to go at a time in which they needed to be able to go, and delaying any bit might have been a real problem. So it's all worked out, but the Rocky Mountain Showdown being back, actually having stakes, having the student bodies of both schools be excited to have it again, and then having it on CBS feels a bit like a renaissance.
Yeah, and I was always an advocate for playing this game at what is now Empower Field.
Me too, and I wish it was still there. I do.
But this year, I will disagree with you slightly. This year, I'm glad it's on campus, and it could be either Boulder or Fort Collins. It wouldn't matter. Last year, it was Boulder. Ratings were through the roof. The place was obviously packed.
Most watched ESPN nighttime game in history, and it didn't end until 2 a.m.
And for last year and for this year, I'm glad the games are on campus. Hopefully, we'll get to a point when these teams do decide to schedule on a regular basis. These two schools make that choice. It's more Colorado's choice probably than Colorado State's choice. Colorado State would like to play every year.
Sure.
But hopefully they would be able to recreate the atmosphere that existed in the early 2000s when most of the games were played at the big stadium here in Denver.
Well, it is going to be fascinating, and it is really nice to see it back. But you're right. Some of it is the idea that the rivalry and the teams have to be of a quality in which you can mostly fill that.
And they won 9 games between them last year.
Right. And you've got to be able to fill up that stadium or real close to it. Otherwise, it doesn't look all that great on TV. And it's better to have the campus vibes,
that's right,
which is what ESPN enjoyed and CBS decided they want a part of. Well, there's a lot of good sports watching this weekend. We'll let you know about it in just a moment. But I want to remind you, by the way, that if you're feeling like getting outside, and by the way, get outside. It's good for you. It's good for everybody. Get some sun. Enjoy the nice weather, except the hail. But you can only do so much about that. But it is this time of the year. You get out and play a little bit of golf. I get that. I've tried it. I apologize to all the greenskeepers, but there are great courses available, and they're easy to get to when you're talking about the city of Denver. Perfect golf pass for you with Denver Golf, whether you're just getting started or you've played for decades. They have a couple different passes at different levels, so you can get into the sport. The practice and play passes for those new to the game to practice what they've learned and then transition to the actual course. The Learn and Play Pass 1.0 is geared towards adult beginners, which I guess despite playing for many, many years, I probably technically qualify for. People that have either never held a club or players looking to advance their game. Or if you've been playing a while, try the Learn and Play Pass 2.0. Is there 1.5 for me? Is that, that maybe that's something.
One or two,
just
Sean.
me. It's probably the one. The Learn and Play Pass 2, which is designed to be flexible for intermediate players. Oh, I'm definitely not intermediate. It's definitely the one. Looking to improve and fine-tune their game. Or if you're just looking to have fun, the Friends and Family Pass lets you play mini golf or hit the driving range. You can bring up to 3 guests with you every time. That's the one I need, the mini golf. I can do that. With 8 unique courses and opportunities for all skill levels, Denver Golf is perfect for anyone. Learn more about everything that Denver Golf has to offer. And if you haven't played in a while, you will be surprised at how much it does by visiting the City of Denver Golf.com. Come home to play. Denver Golf is your neighborhood course. Your neighborhood baseball team takes on the best baseball team in the NL West. The Rockies tonight start a 3-game set against the Los Angeles Dodgers, the big, bad $200 million Dodgers. And the Rockies, well, still 15 games under 500. Not good, but playing immensely better. Had a May that, when you look at a team that's 15 games under 500, seems almost shocking.
Well, tonight they'll be able to finish the month with a win at 14-13, and even with a loss at 13-14. But a winning month of May, even the prospect of a winning month of May, was the furthest thing from perhaps even the minds of the Rockies, coming out of a 6-19.
Probably not the owners, but the rest of the Rockies.
Well,
yeah.
They were 8-28, 1-3 in March, 6-19 in April. They come into May and they aren't playing all that well at the beginning of the month, but they got started on a winning streak, right? And they have ridden that winning streak into 4 series wins in the last 6 series they've played, including series wins, yes, at home, but still against the best team in baseball, the Philadelphia Phillies, took 2 out of 3, and the best team in the American League, apart from maybe the Yankees, in Cleveland, taking 2 of 3 from the Guardians. And now they go to a place that historically has not been kind to them, maybe as good a pitcher's park as there is in Major League Baseball still, in Chavez Ravine, Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. And we'll see if they can keep it going with at least 2 of their best pitchers set to go, I believe, Saturday and Sunday, if I'm not mistaken.
You are exactly right. When you look at this 3-game set, obviously it does start tonight. And when you look at tonight's game, Dakota Hudson expected to start against Walker Buehler. And if you're wondering if that's good for the Rockies, no, it is not. As a matter of fact,
although Walker Buehler struggled a bit.
He has. His ERA at 4.26 is not impressive, 1-2, but the whip of 1.21 is awfully good. And the 17-3 strikeout to walk ratio is. But the Dodgers are a minus 360 on the old money line to win tonight. Obviously, you expect to see the Dodgers.
This is a baseball game where a team is a minus 360.
Yeah, in which, right, teams generally you lose 60, you win 60, and then it's the middle ones that set your thing. But look, the Dodgers at home are very dangerous, and tonight is probably going to be a very, very tough pull, though you never know. But you're right. Over the course of the weekend, the Rockies will have a chance to get better. And it's not because the Dodgers actually have weaknesses when it comes to their pitching staff. They really kind of don't, obviously. But it's because the Rockies actually developed some strength. Quantrill will pitch tomorrow. He'll take on Yamamoto. And the Sunday game of the 2:10 matinee, Austin Gomber, after being skipped a turn, is expected to be out there on the hill, and he will go into the rubber match I hope it's a rubber match if they win one of them, against Gavin Stone. So it's not as if the Rockies don't have an opportunity here, and it's in part because Quantrill and Gomber have played so well. They have, over the last month or so, actually been, in a few different metrics, and especially if you park correct it for Coors Field, some of the NL's best pitchers.
True.
Who saw that coming?
A couple of baseball's best pitchers, at least for the month of May. Now, can they carry it over
against the Dodgers on the road?
Very favorable environment
against a very
unfavorable, terrific
lineup.
Offensive team.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And the real question, I think, this weekend is whether the Rockies can score any runs, coming off a homestand in which they scored fairly freely against 2 pretty good pitching staffs from Philadelphia and Cleveland. We'll see if that can carry over at all, going from maybe the best hitters park in baseball to the best pitchers park.
Here's a weird perspective, right? We know that the Rockies and the Dodgers, when you put the two together, the Dodgers are a vastly better team. We know that. We also know that statistically, historically, even post-Humidor, the Rockies, when they first hit the road after a homestand of 5 or more games, tend to really have a bad couple games. Things drop off for the first 2 or 3 games of any road stand. There, it's more than now a quarter century of history showing this. I mean, it's pretty clear when you're used to seeing balls that are flattened out, the plane of the pitches are flattened out, and then you get to an area like LA where not only do you have an immense amount of foul ground, but you also see a lot of movement, and the Dodgers take advantage of it by throwing always historically, guys that throw good curves that try to get balls that move, try to generate pop-ups in that foul area. So, roundabout way of saying, I guess if the Rockies are going to be generally kind of lousy in the first couple of games of a road trip, why not have it against the Dodgers, against a team that you're not likely to beat anyway? It's not really the worst situation.
It's one of those deals where you go into the series and you're hoping to salvage a game out of a 3-game set.
Absolutely. One would be great.
Losing 2 out of 3 would not set them back all that much, although
it's hard to get set back when you're in last,
interesting.
But I get your point.
Yeah, but a month ago they were buried in last place. Now they're 4 out of 4th in the loss column.
Yeah,
behind Arizona.
They've caught them.
Arizona's backed up, and so there's a 4.5 game difference overall to Arizona's 25 and 31. The Rockies have gone 20 and 35. Now the other 2 teams, San Diego and San Francisco, chasing the Dodgers, are both slightly over 500, but only slightly. The division's run differential is -12. And yes, in spite of a very good month of May, certainly by their standards, an exceptionally good month of May, the Rockies are still a -75.
How about this? Now, one of the
problems
Dodgers
is are a +82.
Yeah, yikes. They've had a good run, but one of the problems is you look at throw out the NL West. They never had a chance in the NL West. But even in the wild card, if you said the Rockies get hot, maybe they stack June like May, who knows? They're still 8 out of the wild card.
Yeah.
And the problem is, even though they've played well, it's kind of hovered there because the rest of the teams around it haven't, a lot of it been much worse. Even though
somebody's got to win.
Right.
You can't have there are 15 teams in the National League.
That bad start really
15 teams aren't going to lose, or the Rockies are going to win and the 14 other teams lose.
But out of the even going to the wild card standings, right, with the 3 wild cards, do you know how many teams in the National League have a winning record that would not be in the playoffs? The answer is 0.
Yeah.
The Cardinals are 27.
Well, you don't have that many winning teams. If you have the Dodgers, barely the Giants and Padres.
And so it's a little disappointing
Milwaukee,
the Rockies couldn't be better.
That's it in the Central.
Yeah.
And then in the East, you've got Philadelphia and Atlanta. That's it. So that's what? 3, 4, 5, 6 teams, and 2 of the 6 in the National League are 29 and 28 and 30 and 29. And could easily be below 500 by the end of the weekend.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's in that part, it's disappointing the Rockies had such an awful start because they
should be close.
They would find themselves, I mean, even if you were 5 games better, 5.
You'd be right in the thick of it.
You'd be in the thick of it. You'd be right in there with Arizona and Pittsburgh
remember this
and the Cubs.
Additional wild card team this year. There's 3 wild cards qualifying for the playoffs.
Slightly
a
better
losing
start.
Team in the American League East, and I understand it's American League East. The Boston Red Sox are 3.5, 4 games out of a wild card, something like that. I mean,
3.5,
to twice as close as the Rockies are, more than twice as close as the Rockies are
29.
with a losing record.
Yeah. There's a lot of haves and have-nots in baseball, and if you could even be in the middle, you'd be in the mix. The problem is the Rockies are one of the have-nots. And interesting, by the way, maybe we'll talk about it as the season goes along. A lot of feedback, by the way, but on the YouTube channel and then social media, Mile High Sports, and then me at S. Drotar as well. The arguments that I made about the Rockies should trade Ryan McMahon, why his value is the highest. That was wildly unpopular. The Elias Diaz, okay, not a problem. Everyone seemed to understand that would move.
What was the rationale? I'm interested.
Because when what
was the rationale for not dealing McMahon?
Almost consistently, The arguments were because when the Rockies youth movement comes to blossom, they're going to need Ryan McMahon.
He'll be
Problem
33,
is,
34 by
Ryan
then.
McMahon is 29 right now. That's the problem. So, when those guys all hit their primes, Ryan McMahon's going to be 34 years old. And this is his breakout year. Are you sure? This is one of the problems that the Rockies themselves, this is one of the fallacies that they fall for. And I like Ryan McMahon. I think he's had a very nice year.
He's had his best year.
Yeah.
So far.
Looks
This
like
is the best start
like
he's ever
all-star.
had.
He looks terrific.
Right.
That said, when someone has the best year of their career, you don't just go, oh, well, that's who he's going to be for the rest of his career. No. At the moment, what you're seeing out of Ryan McMahon is something of an anomaly. Now, hopefully it's not. Hopefully Ryan McMahon is.
Well, the
almost
idea
30, he figures it out.
These are your prime years. Let's say he finishes the year around 30 home runs,
exiting his prime,
and close to 100 RBIs. Okay, he may have one or two more comparable years, but he is likely not to have a better year than the one he's having now.
Go look at no one else. You don't have to look anywhere else except for
Ezekiel Tovar will have many better years than the year he's having right now. He's on the ascent.
Go look at Nolan Arenado.
McMahon's having a career year.
Yeah. Nolan Arenado
at a much more advanced
is
age.
33 years old. He's only 4 years older than Ryan McMahon, right?
People decline in their 30s.
When the Rockies traded him, he had been over 300 in 2 of the previous 3 seasons and 294 in the one before that. He has not gotten over 293. He's been one time at 293 with the Cardinals. Otherwise, he's been in the 250s or 260s. And right now he's hitting 257. And Nolan Arenado is a future Hall of Famer.
I'll give you 4 guys that I can think of right off the top of my head who got better in their 30s. Tom Brady, LeBron James, Peyton Manning, John Elway.
None of them are baseball players.
Henry Aaron.
Okay.
Hit more home runs, certainly. I'm not sure he's a better player in his 30s, but he hit more home runs in his 30s.
But as we talked about a little
after the age of
earlier,
35, he began to approach the all-time
like we talked about
record.
with Javonte Williams and Derrick Henry earlier in the program. You don't find the one anomaly and say, oh, well, he's definitely going to be this guy.
Ryan McMahon is not on that level.
Aaron.
McMahon is a very good third baseman
he really
at this point.
is.
The Rockies are probably better off right now with 29-year-old Ryan McMahon playing third base than they would be with 33-year-old Nolan Arenado playing at third base right now.
Sure.
But Arenado's going to the Hall of Fame. Ryan McMahon
he's going to have to buy a ticket.
Is not going to the Hall of Fame unless he buys a ticket.
Right. And that's the reality of it. We'll see. We'll see what the Rockies do. I suspect the ownership thinks like those fans, and they think that people are going out and buying tickets because
Ryan McMahon buttresses the ownership argument that they always make about players like Ryan McMahon, always too popular to trade.
Everyone must be buying tickets to see Ryan McMahon.
There were not even 20,000 people in attendance watching them take 2 of 3 from Cleveland the other night.
A first place team in an interleague game. Yeah.
Not 20,000 people in there. Yeah. I know they announced 21. There weren't 20,000. There were barely 20,000 Friday night when I went, and the Phillies were in town. It was a terrific game. But as we mentioned yesterday, there's always a lag time.
Right. And that's the way you're seeing it with attendance too. We'll find out.
They've had a good month, but people remember the month of April.
You got to stack them. We'll find out. And maybe Ryan McMahon's one of the keys to doing that. We'll see what they do with the Dodgers this weekend. We'll be back as well. We'll talk about that when we get back on Monday. And of course, the NHL playoffs are still very tightly contested in both sides. Lots of that. Hockey tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday. Catch it all. We're looking forward to talking about all of it with you like we have all week. Thanks for joining us here. You can always, you're watching this on YouTube. You can click and subscribe. Get all of these when it's live. Really appreciate you watching the show and joining us. Danny Bailey's the man in the booth that makes all of it work. Have a safe and happy weekend, because we want to see you back here on Monday. For Sandy Clough, I'm Shawn Drotar. This is Mile High Sports.